All right, so welcome everyone. Welcome to our third session for the Pacific Online Learning and Teaching Network. We've had two sessions already. As I said, the recordings of these sessions are available on social media platforms, which I can send you links to. Swaran did our last presentation and she touched on some of the constraints of online learning and teaching in the Pacific. And today we have Pritika, and Pritika is going to take us to the next step, which is going to lead on from Swaran's presentation about a digital literacy initiative for the Pacific. So Pritika is a computing science and information system lecturer at the Fiji National University. She's currently pursuing her doctoral studies in the field of information systems. Her doctoral research focuses on higher education pedagogy, digital learning, and digital literacy. And as part of her doctoral studies, she has designed and developed a digital literacy measuring tool to measure the Pacific population's digital literacy competencies and beyond. So accompanying this tool, she has also created a remediation tool that improves the digital literacy of individuals. So Pritika is going to share with us more about this tool and how we can apply it within the Pacific context. So over to you, Pritika. You can share your screen if you've got any slides as well.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining us today for the webinar. Actually, it was very interesting to hear some of you saying you are really interested in digital literacy. So to begin with, I know we are into 10 minutes of this webinar, and while we are waiting for the others and while I share my screen, what do you understand by digital literacy? Probably, I just want to know your perception of digital literacy so that when I take you through the webinar, you might come across some surprising elements, because people have defined digital literacy differently, and some include few components and some miss out on the few important components of digital literacy. So probably a one or two word, if you can share what digital literacy means to you, and we'll take it maximum of 3 words, no more than 3 words, what digital literacy means to you. So probably we can start with Dr. Mohammed.
I'm on the spot. So, you know, 3 words. I think when I think of digital literacy, what just comes off the top of my head is, you know, computing.
Okay, that's fine. 1 word will do.
1 word will do. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So Ralph.
3 words. ICT capabilities. Those are the only 2. Yeah.
Okay, Alice.
So mine, Teresa from the Marshall Islands. So mine would be competence, digital platforms.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, me, Alice, online learning skill.
Okay, and Jerita?
This is a digital platform where you communicate using computers.
Okay, that's exceeding 3 words. Okay, anyway, Soren, if you're not busy.
Digital literacy to me means the use of ICT to work with information.
Okay, so even by looking at or by hearing the response of all of us present here, we can see that we have given different dimensions of digital literacy, and digital literacy is the buzzword for the 21st century, and one of the most important skills that we need to have in order for us to live actually and survive in this 21st century. So before I go on to my slides explaining, I would like to share some statistics with you, which I just pulled from the web before I started on this webinar. Actually, if we look at the global population, there are 4.7 billion internet users. And out of these 4.7 billion users, 4.2 billion users are on social media platforms. If you look at the Pacific Islands, 54% of the Pacific population is on internet or are on digital platforms, and 51% of them are on social media. Now, do you think they have the digital literacy skills? Do you think they are aware about the legal and ethical issues surrounding the use of digital platforms? Do you think they are actually communicating online safely? Because we often hear over the news or via different channels that cybercrime or computer crime is on increase. So this brings in the importance of digital literacy. That's number one. Number two is all of us assume, actually I have frequent chats with my colleagues, and then we assume that these tech savvy students or these tech savvy people or the netizens, they are digitally literate. That's what you will hear when you have a conversation with your colleagues or anyone out there. This younger generation, they know how to use technology, they are digitally literate. But is it true or it's just a myth? Let's see. So for my presentation today, I'll talk about the motivation which actually led me to come up with this project, and some statistics from the Pacific which actually prove that the netizens that we are talking about are not really digitally literate, the importance of digital literacy, the design of the new digital literacy tool, some of the statistics from the studies that we have conducted, and obviously we'll have the discussion session afterwards. So when you look at this slide, we can see that technology is not new to us. We have embraced technology, though there is a difference on the uptake of technology if we look at the developed nations and we look at a developing nation like the South Pacific. So in the South Pacific, the uptake is slow, but we have assimilated technology in various sectors such as the agriculture sector, the health sector. We look at the commerce industries, technology is there. We look at the education sector, which has been hugely impacted by the incoming of digital technology. Even when we reflect our personal lives, we are too much technology dependent. Everything we try to use technology, and then we try to perform the various functions or tasks associated in our daily lives using technology. Now, when this technology came in and all the sectors around us or in our society integrated technology, then there was demand from the work sector for the people to be technology literate. Anyone who sends in their CV or resume, the very must or the very first thing that the employers look at is the digital literacy skills. Do they have capability to use technology? Because we eventually know that the workplaces today are technology driven. So individuals need digital literacy. And the sector which provides or which is heavily relied upon to actually advocate digital literacy or instill digital literacy into individuals is the education sector. So my focus is on the education sector because obviously this webinar or this group that Dr. Mohammed has created is it involves learning and teaching in the South Pacific. And then the other important reason why the education sector is important is because the education sector is heavily relied upon for the advocacy of digital literacy. And then the education sector has already gone through this phase of implementing the technology or having technology driven education. And if we look at the South Pacific and some of the developing countries, before the COVID-19 era, we can say there was pretty much traditional face-to-face or classroom teaching happening. And when COVID-19 came in, there was a sudden shift from classroom-based teaching to virtual teaching or outside the classrooms teaching. So the evolution happened from classroom-based teaching or brick and mortar to online teaching. And if you are in the teaching fraternity, you already know about this, that we have transited to online learning. And before the COVID-19 era, online teaching came about to actually meet the demands and needs of the people who wanted to learn but were not able to learn because of the various challenges that they were facing. And after COVID-19 era, when we went online, although things were a bit easy for the students, we can say it had many benefits for the students because flexible learning was there. Online learning actually enabled or catered for education for the inclusives. Also, online learning met the different learning styles of the students, but they are faced with challenges. Even the tech savvy students, they face challenges because they do not have enough skills. In the Pacific, the most common learning management system that we use here is Moodle. And then we have other educational tools such as Zoom, we have the big blue button, we have Skype, and then we have the discussion forums, the quizzes, which are incorporated into Moodle. And we have seen and we have witnessed that students are still facing difficulty in learning through all these educational tools. Even for the facilitators, as an IT facilitator, I know how to use Moodle, I know about the web, so it was a bit easy for me. And I know that those who are in the IT field, you will agree that somehow our competency or computer competency is more than those who are not into the IT field. So the facilitators also faced a challenge, or there was a gap amongst the facilitators in scaffolding online learning to their students. So both the groups as facilitators and the learners, they both face difficulties when it comes to online learning, and the solution is digital literacy. Moving on, why digital literacy is important. So on this slide, I have two models which I have come up after reading so many papers. One is Education 4.0 and the other one is digital literacy characteristics. And if you look properly, if you read both the models, you will see that they map quite well. We are in the era where Education 4.0 is practiced. Like there was an evolution from Web 1.0 to 4.0. Similar manner, education evolved from Education 4.1 or Education 1.0 to Education 4.0. And in the 21st century, these are the expectations of education. One that is one of the objectives for the learning sector or the education sector is to provide quality education, and the other one is to provide lifelong learning. And if one has to be part of it, then these four important components of Education 4.0 actually describes the lifelong learning practices, like using smart education tools such as OERs, multimedia projection, student response system, use of social platforms, the life coping skills, building the life coping skills of our students like collaboration, creativity, innovation, literacy, cybersecurity knowledge. Then use of transformation technologies, which Swarant talked about in her presentation um, in the last webinar: Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, computing, cloud computing, mobile technologies, and the smart learning modes, which I have already discussed, the evolution of online learning, blended learning, personalized learning, remote learning, and project-based learning. When you look at the digital literacy characteristics, which is requirement of the 21st century, there are so many researchers who have pointed out that digital literacy has become the survival skill of the 21st century. So when you look at the digital literacy characteristics, it includes knowing how to learn from anywhere at any time using digital technologies, producing new information using different technologies, having a knowledge about cybersecurity, self and independent learning, use of technology effectively, being responsible and adaptable, knowing how to communicate effectively, and then differentiating between good and bad information. So we can see that Education 4.0 maps very well with the digital literacy characteristics. And we can conclude that if an individual has digital literacy or knows about digital literacy, his or her education journey is going to be successful, and probably the challenges they face in the learning process today won't exist. So digital literacy becomes an important facilitator of education in the 21st century. Then we move to learning in the 21st century, particularly the Pacific. ICT came to the South Pacific in the 1950s, and today we can see that the education sector, not only the higher education, but the secondary and primary education as well, is driven by technology. And I am not really sure about the other Pacific Island countries, but in Fiji recently, after the COVID-19 pandemic, the learning hubs have been created by the Education Ministry. Students can access the learning materials for primary schools and secondary schools using these learning hubs. While if you look at the higher education institutes, they were already practicing the norms of online learning, so that was pretty easy. But the question again comes in. All these online hubs that are available for the students and for the parents, do they really know how to access the resources? Do they really know how to download things? So literacy still is a gap there. And I will show you some statistics which actually proves that students, they face difficulty even switching on a computer in the Pacific. So some of the challenges faced when technology came into the Pacific were the differences in ability and digital competency of individuals, which we say is digital divide, and digital divide is very common in the South Pacific. The need for proper ICT infrastructure, penetration of internet and availability of resources, and availability of trainers. So to curb these challenges, the government and NGOs, they deployed many initiatives such as infrastructure deployment, improved connectivity and bandwidth for higher education institutes in the Pacific, development and implementing policies relating to the use of digital technology, training of the trainers. Even after that, there were issues, and one of the issues that came up was literacy. So the government went back again, and together with the NGOs, they came up with the following initiatives on this slide. One laptop per child initiative in Fiji, Samoa, Solomon Islands, Tonga, ICT 4E interventions, which included establishing and leveraging ICT networks, the introduction of Pacific Island literacy and numeracy assessment, ICT initiatives by the Technical Center for Agriculture and Rural Development, and the integration of financial education within the Fijian curriculum. Despite these initiatives, the fact or the surprising bit was that many of these initiatives were shelved or they were not able to go forth because of literacy issues. People did not have enough digital literacy to carry these projects forward. So another reason why digital literacy is important in this century. So let's look at these statistics. Some of the very simple things we tested, if you look at this particular capture here, we actually carried out a survey with 287 students, and I'm interested in this column here. Simple things such as emails, only 47.2% of the students were using emails frequently. If we look at learning management system, it comes to 14.5%. And as academics, we know that we use this for learning. And then digital library is just 10.4%. When we look at online educational resource, it's just 30.9%. And then we look at reading free course content, it's just 15.0%. So you can see that the figures there, they are alarming, because right now we are following the norm of online teaching and learning, and these figures, they actually make us little scared, we get little scared by looking at these figures. How are our students going to learn? Then some of the simple competencies that we tested with the same lot of students, like technical use of computers, and it involved turning on a computer. You'd see the last column where excellent competency, or they felt that they were excellent in that particular competency. For training on a computer, it's just 86% and not even 100%. And this is the most simple thing, I would say. If you look at computer competency, then you can look at other competencies such as printing a document. Even when we go down to information literacy, we can see presentation tools. Only few percent of the students are excellent in that. And we look at using information from the internet without plagiarizing, it's just 43.4%. So again, another evidence that students are lacking digital literacy skills. And honestly, these are our netizens. These students were the group that we say they are tech savvy, and they have digital literacy skills, and they will be able to learn online. So actually this made me realize that many of us, even around the world, when we say netizens or tech savvy, and we assume that they are digitally literate, so yes, they know how to use digital tools, they know how to use technology, but not for learning. That's one of the things that I have gathered from my research. These netizens, or the tech savvy students, or the group that we have in our society, they know how to use technology, but not for learning. So this is where digital literacy comes in. And also, lack of digital literacy skills have led to high student attrition rates and low student retention rates at the education institutes. So the need for digital literacy comes in. And the most important one is this model here, the 4-gear model, which actually looks at the sustainable development goals. Every nation aims to achieve sustainable development goals, and this can only be achieved through digital literacy. We have people, we have technology, but we need people to use technology and apply relevant skills to achieve sustainable development goals. That's why my model starts with education. Education drives people, or educates the people about the use of the technologies that are available. And then these people, they know, or they have to have the digital literacy skills to achieve the sustainable development goals that every nation has. So that's why digital literacy is important. Then I have a table here which actually shows the components of digital literacy by the different authors. If you look at the first author, he or they say that digital literacy is about operational skills, technical skills, and collaboration skills. If we look at Pedana, his work says that digital literacy is about knowledge assembly, content evaluation, internet searching, hypertextual navigation. So although there were frameworks for digital literacy, but I always felt that the important components that is described by digital literacy, or researchers who have said that digital literacy has these competencies, were not met by the existing frameworks. That's why I came up with this particular framework here. So presenting to you the South Pacific Digital Literacy Framework. And in this framework, there are 6 literacies which are important, which has been identified as important to the 21st century skills. Initially, this particular framework was developed by Covello in 2010, and he mentions that the literacies can change depending on the setting of the study and how individuals live in a society. So I picked his framework because it was very much relevant to the South Pacific, and made revisions or revised the definitions for each of the literacies, because there was a lot of technological development that happened from 2010 till date when I started the project. So the South Pacific Digital Literacy Framework consists of media literacy, information literacy, communication literacy, technology literacy, computer literacy, and visual literacy. Now, many of us are familiar with information literacy and technology literacy and computer literacy, but what about the rest? This was the gap that was missing in all the frameworks that have been developed. And you'll see that each literacy has certain number of attributes which are different in scale, like some has 13, some has 5. Why I have done that is because some competencies under, let's say, computer literacy were also present in media literacy. So to avoid repetition, I tried to have all unique attributes so that the testing of competencies of the students were fair. So in total, 6 major literacies and a total of 60 attributes. Then when we look at the framework, I have the definition for each literacy. Media literacy is using digital technologies to analyze, evaluate, and communicate information using a variety of digital platforms. Then we have visual literacy, that is interpretation of images and then understanding what message the images portray and then using it and then communicating it. And another fact I would like to bring to your attention was I was even surprised by this, and I'd like to share with you. When literacies came about, when technology came about, the very first term that was given to literacy in regards to computers was visual literacy. There was no term as computer literacy or IT literacy or ICT literacy. They came afterwards. And the very first term was visual literacy. And probably it's fair enough because we deal with visuals every day. And I can recall when we were small, when we didn't know words, how would we interpret things? We would see images and then our brain processes it and then we give wordings to it. So probably that's why visual literacy was one of the very first literacies in regards to the use of computers. And then along the line, when technologies came, other terminologies that we see in the figure, computer literacy, information literacy, or technology literacy evolved. And the most two common ones were IT literacy and ICT. So I have given the definition and which are quite clear and which represent the 21st century skills that are needed by individuals living in the 21st century. So using this framework, 2 tools were designed: the digital literacy scale, which is self-evaluated, and the digital literacy intervention program, which actually remediates the competencies of the individuals. I also have my publication listed there, which gives you the details on how these 2 tools were constructed, their validity, their reliability test, and everything that is needed to deploy the scale amongst the users. So let's look at the digital literacy scale first. So as I said, we used the digital literacy framework and we came up with a scale. So in that scale, we have the 6 different literacies and the attributes. And this total points represents the total points for all the 11 questions in information literacy. So let's say if we look at information literacy, it has 11 questions, and one question has been measured using Likert scale, like from 0 understanding to 100%, and that is self-evaluated for now. So for one question, an individual can get a maximum of 5 marks and a minimum of 1. So that's why the total points is 55 for information. So in a similar manner, all the points for all the literacies were calculated, and we came to a total point of 300. Now you'll see that I have the weighted total here. Now why we had to convert these points to a percent of 10% was because when we were preparing this scale, which is shown here, there were many methods that we came across, and literature suggested that for new scales, the class interval method was the best one. And when we looked at class interval method, we came up with the intervals that are listed in the table here. So that's why we had to convert all the points, the maximum points for each literacy, to 10%. And this is the scale that is actually used to measure the digital competencies of the students. Once again, it's self-evaluated for now. And when we look at the digital literacy intervention program, now there were scales already available in literature, which lacked competencies, and then we came up with this one. We actually thought of the next step. We are measuring the digital literacy competencies, but after that, what should we do, or what should happen? And then we decided, in consultation with my supervisors, we came up with the digital literacy intervention program, which actually provides you remediation through the 6 literacies that we have. So when we look at our intervention program, it's very unique. And you will see that in the next slide why I'm saying it's very unique, because there are literacy programs developed, but they seem to focus on one particular aspect of digital literacy. So if we have to say that an individual is digitally literate, why do we focus on one particular aspect? That was the question. Like if you look at digital literacy programs in Syria, if you look at that program, probably it's emphasizing more on the use of MS Word or MS PowerPoint or other presentation tools. And then another literacy program was just based on internet literacy. Then we have the Microsoft Online Digital Literacy course. We have digital literacy education for Google, by Google for Education, and a few more. And I have gone through all these literacy programs, and I noticed that it was either focusing on one aspect or 2 aspects of the digital literacy skills that is needed today. That's why we came up with this intervention here, the digital literacy intervention program. So once again, a lot of thought was given, and to make this interesting, because we know students lose concentration and we can't just have theory there and then go on to the quiz section. Obviously, the students won't read theory. So what we tried to do was we infused it with gamification. So the intervention has actually 3 main activities. You log in, you complete the module section, which is theory based, and then you have the quiz, which is again gamified, and then you achieve a certificate. To make it more interesting, we also have badges for each of the modules. I think that is kind of hot plate when we look at online literacy programs or online courses. They award you with badges. So that's what I tried to do. I included badges for each module. And this table actually shows you the literacy levels after the intervention program is completed, and we have requirements there as well. Another thing we did was, together with having gamification in the quiz part, we also have gamification in the theory part. It's like collecting coins. I actually forgot the name of famous mobile applications or the games that our tech-savvy students play, but I just know that this collecting coins while reading would make it interesting, and that would make them read the theory bit of all the literacy modules that have been developed. So now I'll just take you through both the digital literacy scale and the intervention program. So it begins here. You have to enter your email address and some information about yourself, just for us, for our purpose. And you have to remember your email address, because that's the one you are going to use in the intervention program. And yeah, a few pages of information that you have to fill in. And we also tried to capture the student perception on the various activities they were performing while being online. And some information about their initial digital literacy knowledge. So this particular slide is very important. This is how all the literacies are structured. Like I'm showing you for media literacy, all the attributes are here, and then the competencies are measured in the following manner, self-evaluated, that is. And once you complete each literacy, you can click on next and go to the next literacy. And once you complete the final page of the digital literacy scale, you can click on submit. Right, that's the submit button. And this is the page which shows actually your scores. You have each literacy, the score in each literacy out of the category total and the weighted scores. And also your level of self-evaluated level of digital literacy is indicated there. And if you want to know what it means to be at level 4, you can scroll down and look at the description of level 4. So for this particular participant, level 4 would mean he or she is averagely digitally literate. And then we also have the link for the remediation. So this is the fun part of it, the remediation tool. So this page actually shows you the interface or the user interface for the module. Green indicates already completed, blue indicates not completed, and information about your self-evaluated scores and scores achieved in each module is given together with the badges on the side. So you can see for technology literacy, there is a bronze badge. And this is how modules look like. So one of the modules is the communication literacy, and each literacy has different gamification. I have also included a small video from my end, briefly describing the literacy that is shown. And then that was what I was talking about, the coins dropping from here and there on the theory part of each literacy. So I'm trying to cover all the important aspects of each literacy in the theory bit, capturing students' attention by the use of gamification. And that's the test part. There is a question bank, and out of all the questions, 10 will be presented. And it is sort of an interactive platform for the students. So once the students complete the module, this is what is shown, the score, the badge, and they can retry the quiz or they can close the window. The next literacy is media literacy, and this is about collecting coconuts, moving from pirate wars to collecting coconuts. So it's interesting as well. And in order for the students to watch the video, I also have included coins in the part where the video explanation is given for each literacy. So incorrect answer, the guy doesn't climb. Correct answer, I think he'll go up. Let's see. And so this person has collected many coconuts, so he gets a big gold medal or gold badge rather. So once all the modules are completed, you can view your badges for each module. You can see the survey score is there, remediation score is there, coins collected is there, and I also have badges for the coins collected as well. And then the remediation badges for each module is there. And then you have the digital literacy badge here. So here it says level 4. And when you go down to level 4, that means the points were between 31 and 40, averagely digitally literate. Requisite is given that person has passed 4 or more modules. And once you are completed, you can save a certificate for yourself from the team, and or you can print it for yourself. And there is also a small description about digital literacy and why it is important for the individuals to know more on digital literacy. Okay, so now taking you to the statistics. There are many studies that I have conducted using the scale and the remediation program, but I'll be presenting few. One was media literacy of the senior high school students in Fiji. And you can see I am indicating in summary 61.4% were below level 4, while 38.6 fall in level 4, 5, and 6. Then another study was 867 first year university students. 73% of the students were at level 5 and level 6. Another study was the digital literacy of 2737 senior high school students. And then I'm giving a big number there, 81% fall in the range from level 4 to level 6. That means 81% is distributed between level 4, level 5, and level 6. And the visual literacy study, which actually shows you percentages at each level. Now, why I have given the visual literacy percentage for each level is to show you that 81% looks a bigger number, but when you look at each levels, the percentages are really small. So this shows that our students, whether it's the high school students, that's year 12 and year 13, or our university students, they lack digital literacy. And when we look at the different aspects of digital literacy, such as media literacy and visual literacy, there is a huge gap in the competencies of the students. And as I have indicated, that all these 6 literacies are important if you need to classify that an individual is digital literacy. So although we have piloted, or I have piloted this tool amongst the students, it can be used by anyone in the Pacific and to some extent to the world, because I can proudly say that this is one of the unique tools that has been developed on digital literacy. So to conclude, the tool is there, the framework is there. So now it's up to the education sector to actually revisit the curriculum they have for improving digital literacy, because we can see in the South Pacific, digital literacy mostly involves information literacy and bit of technical and computer literacy. Media literacy and visual literacy work has begun, but it's my project. Like no other researcher has thought about it, or even the curriculum doesn't have those aspects of digital literacy. So probably the tool is there now, and this can be used by the Education Institute in the Pacifics to improve digital literacy of the Pacific populace. And also the individual modules can be used by the different organizations depending which particular literacy they want their workers to improve on, or they want to know if their employees are literate or not. So improving one or taking one module at a time, or improving one literacy at a time, could lead to increasing the bigger digital literacy, and that can contribute to the effective development of any nation. So this was or this is a initial step towards breaking the wall of digital divide in the South Pacific. And these are my publications. If you want to know more about the statistics that I have talked about, or how the tools were constructed and all the methods that were used to proceed to developing this tool. And I'm ready for your questions and comment. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Pritika, for that wonderful presentation. There was just so much there. You know, I think when I think about that tool and the application in the Pacific, I think there's a lot of potential for it to be applied to improve digital literacy and improve students' learning experience as well. So as you know, as you were going through your presentation, I was making a lot of notes and I had a lot of questions, but I thought I'll open it up to the floor first before I ask some questions. I know there's some comments and questions that have come through the chat as well. Ranesh had a question. He said, what would be the difference between very often and frequently for the response to the activity?
Frequently, we'll say, let's say per week, every day. And when we look at very often, we said about 3 to 4 times a week. That's how we categorized that bit of the questionnaire.
Right. And we had another question. Mahereshwara said, what is the most effective learning module amongst all literacy? Does it vary subject to subject?
Yes, I would agree to that, because one of the research studies that I carried out, the most effective modules, effective in terms of, Dr. Rao, if you are there, effective in terms of the module you are saying, or I need a,
Pritika.
yes, yes, sir.
Right. I'm here. Carry on.
I think Pritika needed a little bit of clarification on your question.
So she has provided a lot of list of literacy modules.
Right.
Which one is much effective in terms of learning for the students? And does it vary from subject to subject? Sometimes technical subjects different, non-technical different. So how do you explain?
Actually, from the scores that we got from the survey, I could see that information literacy was very popular amongst the students, and the other literacies were quite new. So we received quite low scores when we were looking at the self-evaluated scores for the different modules. But when the intervention came in, eventually the scores improved for all the literacies. So it's just like how we are advocating our students about all the other literacies that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Pritika, we had another question from Ralph. Ralph said, thank you, Pritika, for the great presentation. In the DLIP, from the communication competency perspective, does it include aspects whereby participants collaborate with others, or is it just a self-assessment?
No, for the communication literacy, the scale is self-evaluated, but the important aspects of communication literacy were placed in the theoretical bit. And then from there, the students had to do some activities, and then they moved to the test component. So when I was phrasing the questions for the test component, it basically was their knowledge about the important attributes of communication literacy. Like important things has booking reference number, or about online communication and other aspects.
Thank you.
Actually, Ralph, probably when the lockdown is over, then we can have a look at the module in detail. So if you want to incorporate something, yeah, you can use me as a resource.
Are there any other questions from the floor? Anyone else wants to make a comment or any follow-up questions? So while people are thinking, I had a couple of questions, Pritika. When I was thinking about your tool, where would you recommend as the most appropriate stage where this tool is used? Is it, in primary, secondary, tertiary? so that you kind of build literacy through the learning system?
Actually, that's one question that we really have to think about. Actually, it's easier for us to begin with the higher education institutes, but we know that the secondary school students and the primary school students they need to have digital literacy, and this scale has been developed in a manner that can be understood even by the primary school students. So if someone wants to integrate that in primary education, they can go ahead, but the way it is deployed and the way it is probably presented to the group or whoever the facilitator is, that is the main concern there, how it is presented to the primary school students. Because if someone deploys it, then that person has to have the explanation done or manuals created, or probably have a face-to-face so that the primary school students understand it. Whereas if we look at the secondary school students, again, we have to do a similar thing, because it's much easier to go online or carry few discussions with the higher education institutes. So it depends how it is deployed, but it can be used at any level.
Thank you. Swaran has a hand up. Swaran, you'd like to ask a question?
Hi, Pritika. First of
Hi,
all,
Swaran.
congratulations on such a remarkable tool specifically designed for the Pacific. I think that's remarkable. Honestly speaking, since we both are in the field of IT and spending so much time even with research, over the past few years, I've even been having discussions in different forums where we talk about, these are Asia Pacific forums, global forums where we talk about the need for digital literacy. And to my dismay, I've even encountered people, instrumental people from the Pacific, saying that it's not needed. Even academics say it's not needed. They say that the resources, even from donor agencies and all, should be better allocated to areas where it would be highly needed or highly effective. But I feel that people fail to realize the fundamental issue here. If you don't have digital literacy, well, first of all, we need to have a firm understanding of what it is. And even, as you said, even academics fail in that area.
Right.
And then I think it was very important for us to have a Pacific-centric approach to this. So congratulations on that. One question that I have, more on the technical front, is
Right, Swaran.
did you have to do like programming yourself? Because I'm not a programmer. This question just comes from the perspective of a non-programmer. Do we have to be highly programming literate, coding literate, to be able to create something like that?
Actually, you will need some programming skills, because for the gamification, if you look at the scale is very simple. Anyone can do it who has basic knowledge about HTML and everything. But if you look at the gamification bit, I have used Articulate 360 and then HTML, Java, and CSS styling. So yes, you would need. So eventually, if you don't have that, you can always seek assistance from these techie people that we have in our surrounding. If someone is part of your group and might agree to assist, then yeah, you can. But if you are really non-technical, then you will need to brush up your skills to create something, especially because we are trying to have something interesting for the students which capture their attention, not just have something plain and let them read and then answer the questions.
Right, I completely agree. Because I've also had a few discussions with people about the tool that you've created, and many people were asking how was it done, how much of programming knowledge, how much of coding knowledge was needed. But of course, you would agree that there's a whole new dimension of learning that you have to go through
Right.
yourself to create this, right?
Yes,
So once
exactly.
again, congratulations, and I for one am very proud of your work, especially the fact that it is the first digital literacy tool in the Pacific.
Thank you, Swaran. Thank you.
Any other questions? I had another question, Pritika. So,
Yes,
when
Dr.
you do
Mohammed.
the self-evaluation, and so, you have those, was it 6 broad areas that you had. So
Yeah,
what
6,
happens-
6.
yeah, what happens when you self-identify as having high competency in a particular area? Does the tool respond and then block out those ones for you, and then just say for example you had a high competency in media literacy and low
Right,
competency in computer literacy, visual literacy, or technology literacy?
right.
So when you come to the modules, do you have to do all of those modules, or can you just focus on those ones that you've self-identified as having low competency?
Right. So to that, yeah, that was one of the questions that I thought of when I was designing the intervention program. So since the scale is self-evaluated, I can self-say that, okay, I'm good at this particular literacy, but your real or your actual skill is tested when you do the intervention program. So for now, what I have done is I ask whoever does the scale to do the intervention program, because when you do the intervention program you can actually realize if you have evaluated yourself very highly in a particular area, your intervention scores will tell you your actual skill. So in order for the individuals to realize that, I have made all the modules compulsory.
Okay, that's interesting, because that it's that whole question of your perception of your skills.
Perception, yes,
Yeah.
and the actual skills.
Yeah, and I think there might be a study in there for you as well to see, how people actually perceive their skill to be, and after doing it,
Yeah, I have actually done the comparison. I did not produce the statistics as part of the webinar, but yes, when you look at some of the scores, some of the individuals claimed that they were highly literate, but when you look at the intervention scores, you would actually see their actuals. There were, if you say out of 10, if an individual said self-evaluation was 10, in the intervention they got 7, or in the intervention they got 6. Not that they failed, but there was this difference of 3 or 4 scores. So
Right.
probably the intervention is a way to realize or make the individuals realize that what their actual skills are.
Right. Can they also go back and do the self-evaluation again after completing the modules?
Okay.
No, I'm just
you're asking.
wondering,
Okay,
just
okay.
asking, is that a possibility?
I have tried that actually. But yes, if we want to incorporate that in as part of the tool, yes, we can do that. It's just, linking few pages and then going back there and then doing the intervention again. So yes, that is possible.
Right.
It's just few
Mhm.
more underground work to do that.
Yeah.
And yes, we can do that. And there's always, that is one of the things that we might do in future after I complete the compiling my thesis, because this scale is going to stay. So one of the things of future work that is going to happen, where individuals can go back to the self-evaluated scores and then come back to the remediation if they want.
Right. I think, it's a wonderful tool, having a look at it, and I think you've done a lot of work. The games and the gamification of learning is something that I really enjoyed looking at it, especially bringing in that Pacific flavor to it. And I think there's enormous potential for your tool, also an enormous commercial potential beyond just the training facilities for big organizations to use the tool to measure digital literacy of the employees, and then offer training programs to remediate that as well. So
actually, I have received interest from higher education institutes abroad, like Germany especially, but I have to wait because I have applied the patent for the tool. So as soon as I get that, so probably the tool can be used in various parts of the world.
wonderful. I think there's a comment that's popped up. Elise, thank you, Pritika, for that informative presentation. The other challenge I have experienced from some students is the unavailability of resources, like not owning a laptop or PC,
Right.
and network connectivity.
It
So that
still
was-
exists in the Pacific. Yeah, it's very common.
Yeah, I think beyond the Pacific as well, when we went into COVID, we had some of those issues where students had devices, but it was shared amongst families, so they didn't have access to a device that they could work from. So I think it's something beyond the Pacific as well. So
Right.
yeah.
I would agree. Yeah.
yeah. The other thing I was wondering, because I'm interested in the design aspect for online learning and creating technology enhanced learning environments. Do you think there is an element that design plays as well to improve the digital literacy? Sometimes when we design online learning courses,
Yes, very
uh,
important. And the technical word for that is heuristics, if I'm right. So
mm,
yes, it plays an important role because actually that captures the student's attention. And I also have collected data on that too. And a lot of statistics are present there, which says that yes, the design is important. The way the pages are structured is important. The way individuals or the students, especially, how easily they are able to navigate through the online pages, it is important. And the type of information that is presented when you design for online learning, that is also important as well. And actually these things either attract them to learn or demotivates them.
yeah.
So I'd say one of the very important aspects of online learning is the design.
Wonderful. If you publish that, I'd love to have a look at some of that data because
Yeah.
that's where that I'm.
And one of our papers is on its way. Actually, we are finalizing the paper, which actually collected information about the critical success factors from student perception. And when we look at the critical success factors, we had the design, we had the facilitator literacy, we have the structure of the pages, we have student literacy, we have student competency, we have student efficacy. So all these aspects were tested. So as soon as we are able to publish that, I will send you the statistics as well.
All right, thank you. Oh, we've got another comment that's just come through. Ranesh has a comment. It's great, Miss Reddy, that you've done many case studies across different stages of education, primary, secondary, and tertiary. Looking at the result from the studies as a whole, have you noted any stage of education where students' digital literacy significantly improves, and therefore perhaps identifying at what stage intervention from educational institutions is needed? That's the first question. The second question is, do you think there are socioeconomic or demographic factors which help explain the different levels of digital literacy that you would find among students in the same stage of education? And the third question is, how can we account for this in the study you do? Perhaps that can help identify where inequities in resources and opportunities exist and therefore can be bridged.
Okay, a lot of questions.
Thank you, Branish, for actually writing that down. So, Pritika, if you just open the chat, if you you can see the question there.
Okay, so I think the very first question is similar to what you asked, Dr. Mohammed. At which level of education should digital literacy tool be implemented? So for this, like I said, can be implemented at various levels. But if you are looking at the general digital literacy education, I think it should start from first grade. Because nowadays our students, they start using technologies at first grade, so it should start from there. And number two, if I'm right, was on the social social and demographic factors. Yes, it does affect the digital literacy of the students, but I haven't proved that, because in whatever studies I carried out, though the statistics say something, I find a way to prove it. So that's an interesting aspect that I need to prove now, Branesh, whether it really impacts the digital literacy of the students. But if I look at the overview, then not much. Probably some students, although they come from rural backgrounds, they still have digital literacy. And you will be surprised that, like I said, the tech savvy students are assumed to have digital literacy skills. And sometimes people say that students coming from rural areas or rural backgrounds are not as digital literate as from the urban backgrounds, but in some cases that has been otherwise, because using technologies for learning is totally different from engaging in these online games or using social media platforms. So it doesn't mean that a student is residing in a rural area and he doesn't know how to use social media, won't be able to use technologies for learning. So there is sort of mixture of results, I would say, but I'll try to come up with something that actually proves it, whether it has a correlation or not. And the third question, I forgot.
How can we account for this in studies you do, and perhaps identify where inequalities in resources and opportunities exist and therefore can be bridged?
Right. If we look at the third question, the only way these things can be bridged is through education. So if we implement a curriculum, it is implemented across the board. It's not that a school gets it and the other school does not. So if these things or digital literacy education is implemented across the board, I don't think there should be any inequalities present.
All right, any other questions? I always have questions, Pritika. I have another one.
Yeah.
In your very early slides, you had talked about the frequency and you said online educational resources, and you had separated that from learning management system as well. What did you mean by other online educational resources? What did that
probably the YouTube videos that are present, or other websites that we often use and give the links to our students to get more information about the topic, let's say. So I meant that, yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, we'll close our session for this month. But before we go, I'd like to thank Pritika for that wonderful presentation and the work that she's done. It's an enormous amount of work to come up with a tool, and then not only come up with the tool and leave it at that stage. I mean, you could have left it just at that stage, come up with a tool, but you've taken it further to design something that could be actioned or implemented in the Pacific to improve the digital literacy of students. So that in itself is wonderful. And I think you should be proud of that achievement, Pritika, because it's not always that we do research and are able to translate it into action. So well done for doing that, and well done for improving or contributing to that space where digital literacy could be improved in the Pacific. So
thank you.
yeah,
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Thank you, Dr. Mohammed, and also thank you for giving me the opportunity to present the tool and my perspective or my project to a wider audience. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for your encouragement as well. And I'll also thank Swaran at this stage, because she is one of the persons that has always encouraged me to go ahead with the presentation of my work to other individuals. So Swaran, thank you so much.
All right, so I will just briefly before we end, share my screen and note the next presentation. So I'm next up. So I did a presentation earlier, in the first session before we had a lot of members joining us, and Swaran and the few that attended asked me to repeat it. Rather than repeat it entirely because there's a video of it, I'm going to, I've added to that presentation, and whilst keeping the theme largely the same. So it is going to carry on for things that you've talked about. So it's kind of well timed, Pritika, and talk about designing and engaging technology enhanced learning environment. And then following that, we'll have the details of the August presentation that I'll put up as well. And Ralph is going to be presenting in our August session. So we've got two sessions already planned, and I will keep you updated about the sessions in September, October, and November as well. But it's lovely seeing you guys. And for those of you that are in Fiji, take care, stay safe. And we can only see, the importance of having good online practices, because the world has changed. I mean, we are using more and more frequently, we're using online as a platform to engage in learning and teaching. So it's great to come together and share some of the good practices that have been going on. So thank you all. Have a good evening, and I will see you at our next session in July.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed.
Will they
Well,